1, 2, 3.
Good evening, Security Council. Unequivocally, these are extremely tumultuous times in which international security is being threatened by the unpredictable and haphazard actions of a rogue state. Following years of mounting tensions between the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and prominent members of the international community, it seems the world is on the brink of war. North Korea seeks to continue its tirades of threats, utilization of biological chemicals, nuclear proliferation, and the violation of state sovereignty. This unapologetic regime has sunk 3 Japanese ships said to be patrolling within the North Korean exclusive economic zone, citing preemptive self-defense as the reason. Such actions spurred the Japanese to request additional American and Allied forces assistance in the region. The deployment of reinforcements has been met with hostile action as unmarked sea vessels launched missiles toward the U.S. territory of Guam. In accepting the duties and responsibilities of the state, the Commonwealth of Australia cannot stand idly on the wayside and allow global security to steadily deteriorate at the hands of the state that is unwilling to conform to the rules and guidelines of international law. The Commonwealth of Australia finds no other option but to respond to the deliberate targeting of allied partners with direct military intervention in accordance with international law. This disdain for nation security and disregard for human life displayed by North Korea have all parties of the United Nations Security Council here today to discuss the way forward. As negotiations commence and states present arguments in support of their self-interest, it is crucial to note time is of the essence. In the midst of our deliberations, North Korea grows increasingly agitated, and thousands remain displaced due to the looming threat of nuclear aggression. North Korea is a rogue state. The term rogue state demarks a small to medium-sized state considered to be hostile and governed by a repressive authoritarian regime that flout international norms. History, the international community has a history with North Korea desires to develop and amass nuclear arsenals. The most recent instance of North Korean naval aggression is not new. Controversy surrounding North Korean involvement of naval warfare and sinking of ships can be linked to the alleged targeting of South Korean warship in 2010. During a joint military exercise between U.S. and South Korea, an explosion occurred, causing the South Korean warship to split in two and sink. Australia was tasked to be part of an investigative team that concluded North Korea was responsible for the sinking of the warship. Continued North Korean aggression in the Asia-Pacific is well documented, and pursuit of peace through diplomatic channels has been unsuccessful. North Korea cited preemptive self-defense as its reason for sinking the 3 Japanese ships patrolling its EEZ. The notion of preemptive self-defense became a major international concern and controversy in several historical periods. The Cuban Missile Crisis is frequently cited as an example of preemptive self-defense. The actions undertaken by this antagonistic North Korean regime are far from unique when evaluating the history of armed conflict in international disputes. North Korea has demonstrated a continuous pattern of disregard for global security, and its recent actions in conjunction with past grievances can no longer be tolerated. The Commonwealth of Australia is committed to bringing the perpetrators to justice in accordance with international law. Now, why does the Commonwealth of Australia care? Within the context of the current crisis, one of the most important multilateral agreements the Commonwealth of Australia is party to is the Australia-New Zealand-United States Security Treaty. The treaty explicitly calls the U.S. and Australia to cooperate on military matters relating to the Pacific region. Article 5 mandates that when an attack occurs in the Pacific made upon any parties of the treaty, an obligation falls upon each to act to meet the common danger. Thus, the failed missile attack against the U.S. territory of Guam constitutes an armed attack in which Australia must be ready to respond in accordance with international law. Beyond the clear relationship between the U.S. and the Commonwealth of Australia, there exist regional agreements that also require attention. Both the U.S. and Australia have bilateral agreements with Japan, and these help to shape the framework for their security policies. Though the sinking of Japanese ships by North Korea did not constitute a formal commitment for intervention concerning what is owed Japan, it did, however, disrupt regional security, which requires a response in accordance with regional agreements. Before potential security actions can be properly proposed, an Australian interpretation of actual crimes committed by North Korea within the parameters of international law must be provided. Concerning the sinking of Japanese ships by North Korea for preemptive self-defense, Australian interpretation of international law deems this to be a violation. Under the United Nations Convention of Law of Sea, within the EEZ, foreign states still enjoy the freedom of navigation and overflight, which is specified in Article 58. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea does not give coastal states the right to regulate military activities in their parts of their EEZ. There is no evidence to support the North Korean claim that Japanese ships were spying and planning to conduct an attack, and thus preemptive self-defense was necessary. Preemptive self-defense is authorized when the threat posed to the state is instant and overwhelming, leaving no room for deliberation. Yet there were no indications that an actual threat was imminent. Rather, an attack was possible, and a response to a potential threat constitutes preventative self-defense, which is not considered legal according to international law. Considering this unlawful act of violence and declaration of war against Japan and its allies, the Commonwealth of Australia sees no choice but to act militarily. In regards to the proposed action for the UN Security Council, the Commonwealth of Australia strongly disagrees with pursuit of diplomatic solution, though it realized that this would be the best case scenario. If direct military intervention is not an option, the Commonwealth of Australia proposes the imposing of intensified sanctions on North Korea. Collectively, the international community must place bans on exports of energy to North Korea. Said bans would include imposing an oil embargo, which would restrict the trade of petroleum and petroleum products to the rogue state. Sanctions like these would be implemented in an effort to force North Korea's hand, making them sit for negotiations. However, the preferred course of action for the UN Security Council is military intervention. Beyond the fact that the actions of North Korea directly call Australia to take up arms and allegiance with the United States and Japan, failure to do so will ultimately result in continued North Korean aggression, which will result in the unnecessary loss of human life. Sanctions which attack financial capacity seem to be rendered useless and require an extensive amount of time to affect the North Korean economy. Given the bleak nature of the situation, the Commonwealth of Australia moves that the United Nations Security Council enacts its enforcement powers under Chapter 7 of the Charter. It is evident that the crisis initiated by the actions of North Korea is a threat to international peace and security. Said threat is a requirement under the provisions of Article 39 and 42. Regardless of the approach the UN Security Council decides to take, the Commonwealth of Australia remains committed to the regional and international security. Australian borders will remain open to displaced civilians, and they will be treated humanely in accordance with the UN Convention relating to the status of refugees. Ultimately, the course of action that the parties take will result in the preservation of peace. Thank you.
see anybody leave.